Hello, and welcome to another episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and I'm happy to be here today. And we're talking about a bit of a heavy topic. So, we're going to talk today about how shame is born in silence and how isolating yourself and being in isolation can exacerbate harmful eating behaviors. And then we're going to talk about some ways that we can move through and move out of the tendency to isolate ourselves when either we're in the throes of a addictive eating behavior pattern, whether we're actively binging, or whether we're actively um, restricting or feeling obsessive about food, how we could move through that tendency to isolate ourselves and really get to a place where we can let the world in and feel safe and trusting letting the world in while we're healing from something that might be a bit painful or something that we might feel a little bit of shame around. And I know that this particular topic feels very close to home for me, and I think that it feels close to home for many people. But I think that what's interesting to notice is that to start, I think we bring up shame as a feeling that many of us feel when it comes to our relationship with food and our bodies. But I'm not sure if everybody or people really recognize that a lot of that feeling of shame is because we're isolating ourselves, and shame is born in silence. And so if you think about it, how often do you hide when you're struggling? And how often when you feel out of control with food or ashamed of your body, do you avoid going out with friends, avoid going on dates, avoid putting yourself out there for that interview, or um, avoid the camera, right? Avoid being seen. Right? How many times do we do that? Because we feel like we'll wait until we're fixed, we're healed, and then we'll let the world see us. Then we'll be willing to put ourselves out in the world. But the truth is that that ends up being that ends up not being the right way to go, because that isolation keeps reinforcing the shame, and the isolation and that mindset of I'm just going to stay by myself, I'm just going to be by myself until I'm better, actually is just a toxic cycle that breeds shame and breeds low self-worth, breeds depression. And I know that I've experienced this myself. And today I'm going to share some of the thoughts around that, but also I want to give you, so stay till the end of the episode, because I'm going to give you some new things that you probably maybe you haven't really thought about before, that you can do to to compassionately and in a safe way for your nervous system really kind of support you and encourage you letting yourself be seen even while you're in this space. So, like I said, I'm going to show you this, and I'm going to explain how staying in our tiny world, staying in this small world, believing that if you just stay quiet and kind of strong arm it yourself, it'll fix the problem. I'm going to show you that that's not true, because it doesn't work. Okay, so let's talk about what happens when shame does take hold, right? So when you're dealing with something like binge eating, emotional eating, obsessing over food, there's this deep sense of embarrassment, right? Like you don't want anyone to know. You think to yourself, if people saw what I'm really doing, they would judge me. There's this negative narrative that goes on in your brain. Um, no, there's going to be judgment of your eating behaviors, also going to be judgment of your physical appearance. Ultimately, you're just going to feel like a big failure. But what happens is that the more that we fear judgment and the more that we think about our behaviors in relationship to how other people are going to judge us, the more we hide. And the more we hide, the stronger the shame becomes. And like I said earlier, shame thrives in silence, right? Addiction behaviors, shame likes when you're by yourself because then it has all the control. It grows in the dark spaces of our minds. It grows in these moments when you're alone with your thoughts, your fears, your feelings of inadequacy. And the more isolated that you become, the more that you end up leaning into those harmful eating behaviors to cope. I remember so clearly, and it's something that I often share, that in those years, but the time I was, 19 years old to 28 years old, around those times, I would say that, especially my early 20s, actually, I used to call my eating disorder my best friend. It was really the thing that kept me company, even though it was really, really toxic, really, really harmful. And when I knew that it was toxic, when I knew that it was harmful, I felt like I needed to be by myself. I felt like I needed to hide. I kept all my struggles hidden. Um, I tried to present to the outside world that I was fine, that I was handling it. But ultimately, what I was really doing was I was disconnecting from myself, and I was disconnecting from other people who potentially could have been a source of support for me. Ultimately could have been that source of connection I was looking for, that I kept trying to find in my relationship with my eating, right? And in my, curated experiences with my food, right? Like I would be at certain events, and while I was at events talking to real human people, I would like tune out internally. I couldn't really connect with that. And I would be imagining myself in my own house, like opening, eating my food, watching TV. Like that's where my desire was to be, because I was so comfortable alone. That was really the only place that I felt like I could be truly myself. And, you know, that that was a real that was a real turning point for me. Right? That was a real turning point for me, was to recognize that I really only felt safety. I really only felt that ability to relax and feel like I didn't have to put on such a strong face. I felt like I could only be my true self when I was alone. But the thing was that even in those short times when I would, go to my house and have my ritual eating habits, and it would give me a sense of peace and resolution for like 5 minutes. And then 25 minutes later, after I had, binged an entire pint of ice cream or something, whatever it was, what did I feel? I felt shame. And what did I really want? I wish that I wasn't by myself. I wish that I had, was able to have a life that was more full and that had more love in it. And what I realized and learned was that shame dies in connection, right? It's like there's this story that I once heard about this, I think it was like a monk in a cave or something. So there was this monk in a cave, and it was a dark cave. And he saw this thing slithering around, right? Him. And he was so nervous and worried. He was by himself. He was nervous and worried. He saw this, you know, this thing slithering around. It looked like a snake. So he thought it was a snake. He was like, fear came up, worry. He was so nervous. Like he was started to make all of these assumptions in his head about what was going on. And then once light entered the cave, he realized that it was a rope. It wasn't a snake. And I say this because his fear and all the worry and all the things that he thought were true died when the light came in. And connection is the light for shame, whether that's a connection to yourself or whether that's a connection with other people. And I remember the first time that I confided about my relationship with food to somebody and my struggles with how I really felt about my body and how I really felt about, and, how I really felt about my struggle with my compulsive eating habits. It was not an easy thing to do. I was worried. I was scared. I thought they would judge me. I thought they would think less of me. But ultimately, like what I found was empathy, understanding, compassion. Sure, they had questions. Were they surprised? Yes, because I was in isolation all the time. And when I did show up in the world, I presented in a way that seemed like everything was fine. So, of course, there was some surprise, but there was no judgment or like, oh my God, like you should be ashamed of yourself. Like there was none of that. And that ability to feel seen and understood and just a kindness coming towards you for something that you're struggling with is so big. And it's a really important thing to realize, because it can be really scary to open up and let other people see that other part of you. But when you're stuck in your head, isolated with shame and, holding all of that guilt, that shame by yourself as your only companion, it's really easy to spiral. It's really easy to spiral. And then you end up turning to food again as a way to numb those anxious feelings that come when you're spiraling. And it just becomes this really, really negative cycle of anxiety, of sadness, of feeling like we're not enough, and then turning to food again, and then feeling shame again. And so it's just really, really important to remember that the more you retreat in silence, thinking that by isolating yourself and by, not letting anyone see that you're struggling, that you're just going to handle it and eventually get through the other side, the more you're putting yourself in a situation to be triggered to use food as a coping mechanism even more. And the more you retreat into silence, the more food becomes your outlet. And it ends up not even being about the food. It's not even that the food is so tempting. It's that you're seeking connection. You're feeling disconnected. You're feeling disconnected from yourself and you're feeling disconnected from other people. And so the only way to break through that is through connection. And we can do that through community. We can do that through connecting to ourselves. So let's go into some ways of that we can create this connection, where, as we're talking about today, connection is that light bulb, that light switch, that sunlight to breaking the shame. Because the direct way, the kryptonite for shame is connection. Okay, so this is what we want. So, how can we create connection? So, of course, we can create connection, like I said, by inviting someone into your experience and holding it with you and sharing it with you. Now, that I understand can be hard, right? That could be challenging to do. So, what I like to do and what I did do for my own self is that I created a connection to myself first. And so, I want to talk about that because you can create a connection to yourself without being alone. And the way that you could do that is you could start to do solitary activities where there are other people around that don't know you as well. Okay, so something that could be something that's really good about that can be, like a yoga class, a dance class, especially things that are, you know, helping you connect to your body. I feel like those are really, really, really good. Um, are are to engage your body and do it with other people around, so you get that feeling of other people seeing you, but it might not necessarily be the closest people to you that are seeing you. So you can slowly train your nervous system to receive other people without it being so high risk. So I really like that. I did that. I started going to yoga classes. I started going to painting classes. I started going to dance classes. Another thing you can do is you can journal for self-awareness, and you can use the journal prompts like, what am I feeling right now? Why do I feel the need to hide? What would it look like to accept myself in this moment? Right. So journaling is good as well. I don't think it's enough, which is why I don't only give journaling prompts, in my curriculums, but I think that journaling can be a really helpful tactic. You also want to practice self-compassion. So, kindness to yourself through affirmations is a really nice and gentle way to combat shame. And you can take some affirmations and you can print them out. You can put them on your mirror. You can put them around. You can put it on the screensaver of your phone so you could take a look at it, have it be a really low lift to look at it and remember. But affirmations like, I am worthy of love and acceptance just as I am, is a really good one. Or, I forgive myself for being imperfect and I'm honoring the process of my journey. Things like that are really good because over time, affirmations can help retrain your brain to focus on being kind to yourself rather than being super critical to yourself, or telling yourself that you're doing something bad, or disconnecting yourself from your feelings. Another thing that you can do, celebrate the small wins, right? Celebrate the small wins, because a lot of times shame really happens because we're in a perfectionist mindset. But celebrating small wins can totally be what shifts your mindset towards the process. So maybe you ate one meal mindfully. Maybe you went to the cabinet to binge, but you didn't binge in the end, right? Celebrate that. Maybe you reached out to a friend for support. Maybe you journaled a difficult emotion instead of turning to food, right? No win is too small to acknowledge. And so by focusing on these small victories, you start building that foundation of self-worth, right? Of connecting to yourself. And that helps to dismantle the power that shame has over you. And I think it's important also to revisit your values, right? So a lot of times when we're living in shame and isolation, there is a core value misalignment that's going on underneath the surface. And so you want to think about how you're living your life, right? Like, are you living meaning like, are you living in a city, but you really would love to be more around nature? Does your job require you to compromise what you need to feel calm? And I'm not saying that you have to feel calm all the time, but like, think about it. If like 85% of the time you're not feeling calm in a job, I feel like that's a problem. If 40%, 30% of the time you're not feeling calm in a job, that's fine, right? I'm not here to tell you that like you have to feel amazing all the time. That's fine. But if it's impacting your life outside of work to a level that feels like it's triggering you, or that it's impeding the quality of your life, take a look at that. Are you in a relationship that perhaps is not supportive, that maybe is toxic, that might be abusive in some way? Are you living with somebody who triggers your nervous system in a way? Do you feel safe physically or emotionally, right? Like, you need to take a look at your values. Are you spending your energy and time doing something that you really want, or are you being a people pleaser and going along with other people's ideas of how you should spend your time and what you should prioritize, right? Are you prioritizing you and what you really want? Do you know what that is, right? So all of these things are things that are really, really valuable to to look at, to help to alleviate shame. And then just starting a practice of daily check-in and self-reflection, right? Incorporating daily check-ins with yourself to assess your emotional state, not so much to change it, but just to recognize it. Or you can ask yourself how you're feeling emotionally and physically. And this helps to spot shame patterns. And this helps you to know yourself better so that you can make that change. You can connect to yourself and make that change. Okay, so these are some self-guided ways that you can start to create that connection, turn that light bulb on so that shame can disappear for yourself. And then, of course, when you feel safe and ready, you can invite other people in to support you and help you, unburden from some of the shame, trusting that it's safe and that it's okay. All right. So that is all that I have for you today. Of course, if you have any comments or questions, you can always leave a comment on Spotify. Okay. We always have an option for you guys to leave a comment, ask a question. We love to hear that. Please, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, rate the podcast, leave a review. We really love those. It really helps to give the podcast a bit more juice in the algorithm, and we love that. So thank you for that. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe. Really love making these videos for you guys. And yeah, that's it. So don't forget, you can join me next week for another episode about how to heal emotional eating, how to love your body, how to lose weight with sustainable strategies and lasting change. And just a quick note, this podcast, of course, I want to give you strategies for weight loss and all that, but it's never really just about the weight loss, right? This is about becoming yourself. This is about attuning to yourself and becoming your truest self, maybe for the first time. So thank you so much for listening. And until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.